The Neo-Baroque turned out to be particularly useful for the purposes of the post-boom expression of defeat and disillusionment that arose in the wake of the coups in the 70s. In the wake of political catastrophe, new strategies of writing were called for that would destroy the false harmonies of the military regimes of Pinochet and the Argentine Proceso, as the dictatorship was known in Argentina, which justified human rights abuses as the necessary collateral of having saved the nation from socialism. Against the deceptive illusionism of the fascist state's official narratives of progress, Neo-Baroque anti-dictatorship literature juxtaposes a critical poetics of artifice, allegory, and disillusionment. Neo-Baroque fragmented allegorical images haunt the simulacra of the authoritarian state. To unmask the dictatorship's official narrative of progress, the anti-dictatorship Neo-Baroque uses the Benjaminian strategy of brushing history against the grain and writing history under the sign of melancholia and the untimely, thus exposing Latin American civilization under the dictatorships as a wasteland of ruins. It's like searching in the wasteland, in the garbage heap for truth. Okay, civilization as a wasteland of ruins strewn with the rubble of the discarded cultural residues of the violently destroyed past by the dictators. Neo-Baroque anti-dictatorship expression is found in several media. In fiction, for instance, in the Chilean Diamela El Cid's early work until 1990, especially the narrative Lumpérica, which is a performance prose. The Chilean José Donoso novel Casa de Campo, which is from '77. And also in poetry, you already mentioned the Argentine poet Nestor Pellonger, and the Chilean poet Raúl Ruizs was working very closely, collaborating with Diamela El Cid in the late 1970s, early 1980s, under the dictatorship still. Just as the effervescence of the boom in Latin American literature of the 1960s was terminated by the dictatorships also ended the emergence of new revolutionary Latin American cinemas in the 1960s. Many Chilean and Argentine cineasts, among them Raúl Ruizs, one of the popular unity filmmakers under Allende, went into exile, where their work took on new directions and where their trajectories diverged as they dispersed around the world. A prolific and experimental filmmaker, Ruizs absorbed the legacy of French New Wave cinema as a beginning filmmaker in Chile during the 1950s and early 1960s, long before exiling himself to France in 1973, where he remains based today, although he has done some projects in Chile after the end of the dictatorship. Ruiz's memory of appearances employs both vivid and expressive mise en scène, as well as the montage style of jump cuts made famous by Godard. In contrast to Ruizs and many other established film directors who received death threats from right-wing death squads, Bembergs, María Bembergs, one of Latin America's most famous feminist filmmakers, did not go into exile. This is likely because at the time of the dictatorship, her career had yet to begin in earnest. Bembergs' career did not flower until Argentina's post-dictatorship period of the 1980s, the beginning of a period of critical nationalism in Argentina, when the newly restored democratic government of Alfonsín provided film funding which allowed the traumas of the recent past to be explored through cinema. The result was a new, democratized Argentine film industry. Bemberg made two historical films which allegorized the dictatorship. The first was the melodrama Camila, and criticized the dictatorships from a feminist viewpoint. Okay, that's so much for the first proposition. Second proposition, Ruiz's and Bembergs' cinematic adaptations of Calderón and Sor Juana's life, respectively, forge elaborate parallels between state terror in the 20th and 17th centuries. 17th century protagonists come to resemble 20th century political prisoners and victims of state terror. In so doing, Ruiz's and Bembergs' films construct a trans-historical genealogy of the repressive state Baroque, linking the 17th century Baroque of absolutism and the Counter-Reformation that Maraval once writes about, adamantly historicizing the Baroque as this art of the Counter-Reformation, to the late 20th century guided culture of Pinochet's Chile and Proceso Argentina, because the dictatorships, 20th century dictatorships were the same. They also had this spectacle of the official spectacles of power. This trans-historical genealogy of the authoritarian state Baroque is the dialectical counterpart of the genealogy of the minor, anti-institutional, and decolonizing New World Baroque, emerging in the theories of Les Hermanima, Carpentier and their successors, Glissant and De Campos and others. Now, defense of the second proposition in more detail. Ruizs deploys Calderón's Baroque play about kingship and tyranny to allegorize totalitarian repression in Chile under Pinochet. The theme of tyrannical rule and Oedipal struggle between a dictator father and his disinherited, deceived and imprisoned son in Calderón's play come to allegorize Chile under totalitarian rule. The trials of Segismundo, Calderón's protagonist, and the tyrant Basilio's son come to emblematize the trials of Ignacio Vega, a Chilean dissident, and Ruiz's protagonist. Both are the victims of human rights abuses of authoritarian regimes. To achieve this effect, Ruizs constructs a dual plot employing the device of the play within the play, or rather film within the film in this case, that embeds Calderón's play into the contemporary Chilean story. As Ruizs explains, the link between Calderón and dictatorship Chile is allegorical, and Ruizs is a big fan of allegory. It is based on the yoking together of the dissimilars, the definition of allegory, on arranging improbable parallels between distant elements. And here's Ruizs. He says, I wanted to make a film about what happened in Chile without using Chilean elements. It was a case where allegories infected other systems and made everything else allegorical. The film is making a connection between allegorical systems. It is allowing Calderón's La Vida es Sueño to stand for Latin America. By mixing both, the result is that Chile itself becomes an allegory for something else. End of quote. Ruiz's emphasis on allegory and artifice is part of his concerted attack on cinematic realism and his neo-Baroque cinematic poetics of visual excess. Quote, I am not, and this is a wonderful quote, I love this. This is actually in the article by Laleen Jayaman, in this Australian critic, and she quoted Ruizs as having said, I am not an ideologue of the Baroque, Ruizs says, I am simply Latin American. I can't help but be Baroque. Allegory for me is much more than a game or an element of style. Calderón's melancholy Baroque prince, Segismundo, becomes the counterpart of Ruiz's protagonist, the exiled Chilean dissident Vega. Both are the victims of elaborate conspiracies. Like Benjamin's analysis of Baroque plays in his Trauerspiel study, Ruiz's post-dictatorship film thus turns on a Baroque melancholic self, a self constituted by suffering and loss. King Basilio of Poland, Segismundo's father, intended to rob his son and legitimate heir to the throne of his lawful title and give it to a foreign prince, Astolfo. Similarly, the exiled dissident Vega has been led into a trap by his former pro-Pinochet enemies who lured him back to Chile under false pretenses. In both cases, the perpetrators are state officials. Both conspiracies involve state terror. Likewise, the tribulations of Calderón's protagonist come to prefigure the tribulations of Vega, the persecuted dissident. Like Segismundo, Vega struggles to integrate the fragments of his dislocated identity and distinguish truth from illusion, dream from wakefulness. When, after awakening in the palace, dressed in royal robes, Segismundo wonders, Válgame el cielo, que veo? Yo Segismundo no soy? Heaven help me, what's this I see? Am I not Segismundo? His soliloquy also allegorizes Vega's mental disorientation, Vega's vacillation between lapses of amnesia and sudden recollections of forgotten events and people. Ruizs points to these thematic parallels by intercutting Segismundo's soliloquies with Vega's unraveling drama, including enigmatic shots allegorizing the confusion in Vega's mind, where veiled anonymous figures stumble through a space filled with cobwebs and drenched in surreal greenish light. Okay.